I'm honored to have this opportunity. I feel privileged to have this opportunity. I'm aware every time something happens like the introduction was just made, that we're among a minority of people on the planet who have the opportunity to just come together like we're doing here today, and particularly as a woman, to express myself and what my thoughts and beliefs are. And I think particularly at a time like this when all of us are so aware of the very deep challenges that we face as a country and as a democracy, which we will talk about today, I think it's also important that we remember the things that remain, the good that remains, and that we need to expand on in every generation. A presidential campaign, like any political campaign, is one long job interview. And I'm just grateful to you that you're here today to give me the opportunity so that you get to meet the candidate for this job and hear from me what I would do with this job if you were to give it to me. So thank you. I think that the United States has before us, politicians always, come up and say our best days are ahead of us. It's this like stale, stupid slogan that they say. Well, the truth of the matter is not necessarily. Our best days might be ahead of us, but our best days are not guaranteed to be ahead of us. And I believe that in order to initiate an era that is indeed the best days ahead of us, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves about the era that we are in now. And I believe that if we do take a good look in the mirror as Americans, because I think that that is our responsibility. Democracy does not just give us rights, as important as those rights are, particularly right now when they are under assault in various ways. We also have responsibilities, and I think that every adult generation, enough is enough with who's what age and what generation. When I say generations here, I mean those of us who are adults, whether you are 18 or you are 80. It's the same conversation. We are the keepers of the ideal, and we have a responsibility to it. When I was younger, you used to hear an expression that you don't even hear much anymore, to form a more perfect union. Obviously, we've never been perfect. We've never been a full manifestation of the ideals on which we purport to stand. The point is that it's the responsibility of every generation to do our part, to protect what is that is a manifestation of those ideals and to expand upon the franchise. In order to do that, once again, however, we need to be brutally honest about where we are. So I'd like to begin with that conversation. I want to take a good look at where we are, because I think if we don't take a good look at where we are, we can't have a seriously intelligent conversation about where we need to go and what we have to do in order to effectuate those changes. If we want to look at where we are, I think in order to get the best view of it, we also have to look at where it all began. So I'd like to talk for just a moment about 1776. In 1776, something very earth-shattering occurred, of course, and that was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And with the signing of the Declaration of Independence, profoundly enlightened principles were imbued into the founding of a nation in a way that had never occurred before. There had been centuries of monarchy and aristocracy. I remember as a child, perhaps you do as well, I remember being taught about the divine right of kings, that people believed that God had given the king the right to rule, and that right was then shared by his or her rich friends, right, the aristocracy. And everybody else was here basically just to be a serf on some level to the entitlement that was guaranteed to these upper classes and monarchy. Theoretically, with the founding of this country, that was repudiated, turned on its ear. God created all men equal. All men equal. That God gave inalienable rights to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness. That governments are instituted to secure those rights, not thwart those rights, not undermine those rights, not limit those rights, but to secure those rights. And if government was not doing its job, that it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it. A very profound document that, signed in 1776, and I remind you that not only are those ideals profound and even somewhat radical for 1776, they are profound and somewhat radical today. However, even though 56 men in signing that document were risking their lives in order to do so, because if the British had won the war, all of them would have been executed as traitors against the King of England. But none of us are stupid, we also know. 41 of the 56 were slave owners. That's been with us from the beginning. That's our story. We are both and. We have always been both and. We are, on one hand, a country which is founded on these profoundly enlightened principles, which it is the responsibility as well as the right of every generation to protect, to foster, and to expand. And we have always, as well, contained forces who, usually for their own economic, if not ideological purposes, had no intention whatsoever of seeing those principles truly manifest, and have proven in even atrocious, hideously violent ways that they would go to whatever lengths necessary to make sure that those ideals were not manifest. This is nothing new. This has been with us from the beginning. So you start with that. You start with the realization that there is this bipolarity that's built into the American psyche. This is the American story, that we are both and. But if you look at the trajectory of our history, we tend to self-correct. We do bend. The moral arc of American history is long but bends towards justice. We had the institution of abject slavery, and generations rose up and responded with abolition. We had generations of institutionalized suppression of women. Generations rose up and gave us women's suffrage, the women's suffrage movement, the suffragist movement, and the 19th Amendment. We had institutionalized segregation, institutionalized suppression of black people that continued in the American South. A generation rose up with the civil rights movement, desegregated, passed civil rights legislation, and continued on the still as yet not fully completed journey, but certainly one that is on the move. It's simply our turn. It's our turn now. But today, it's not a specific institution. It's not an operable tumor. It's not like the problem is slavery, we just need to abolish it. It's not like the problem is women don't have the right to vote, we just need to pass an amendment. It's not that the problem is segregation and we need to desegregate. It's more like an atomizer spray of injustice. It's like everything. It's mass incarceration over here. It's the contamination of our food and our water and our air over here. It's wars that should never have been fought over there. It's limiting Americans' rights, whether they are women or transgender or blacks or anyone else over here. And so we have the problem not of a specific tumor, but almost of a cancer that has metastasized. As these forces are not limited to one circumstance. So you ask yourself, well, what's the underlying common denominator? What's going on here? We're living at a time, first of all, and I speak to you as someone who knows that I'm speaking to adults. Part of the problem here is that we have been trained as citizens. We are used to politicians talking to us like we're in the 7th grade, which in a way is an insult to 7th graders. This is not a moment for us to be immature thinkers. There is a reason why they have talked to us like we're dumb or something, because number one, they think that that will make it easier for them to do all the serious higher level thinking and sort of acquiesce our power to this political class, which is never what it was supposed to be here. So democracy is under assault, but we have to be very mature in our recognition of how it's under assault. It's an assault from the outside by genuinely fascist forces at this point. I mean, what's going on in Florida and what the governor of Florida is trying to do, these are fascist. These are fascists, okay? But Republicans are going to have to handle that. I'm not a Republican, so what's happening in the GOP, that's somebody else's. But the problem is not just that democracy has been assaulted from the outside by fascist forces. The democracy has been eroding from the inside by neoliberal economics. Because what neoliberalism is done, it has weakened the population, it has weakened people. So let's talk about what we're talking about here. We've already talked about the trajectory from 1776. Now let's go back to the 1970s. The first thing I want to point out that some of us remember is that in the 1970s, The average American worker had decent benefits. In the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a home. In the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a car. In the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a yearly vacation. In the 1970s, the average American could afford to send their kids to college, American worker, and in the 1970s, the average American worker could afford, if they chose, for one parent to stay home and be with the kids when they got home from school. Now, some people in the room are nodding because you remember. And I remind those of you who are nodding that there are people in this room who never knew that America. It's just like a fairy tale, some quaint romantic memory. Well, you guys tell us that. That's what it was in the 1970s. Now, some people say all this stuff began with austerity from Carter, whatever. It came on the scene full-blown with Ronald Reagan. Trickle-down economics. This idea that if we only passed policies that would make it easier for the stockholder and CEO class to get rich. See, this would be great, they said, because these are the job creators. So they will make more money, but that's a good thing. See, it's not bad, it's a good thing, they said, because they will create so many jobs that the money will trickle down and it will lift all boats. Well, after almost 50 years, I think the jury is in. This did not only not lift all boats, it has left millions and millions and millions of Americans without even a life vest. It has been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%. It has taken us from the description of the average middle-class worker that I just gave you to the fact that today 39% of Americans say that they are skipping meals on a regular basis to pay their rent in the richest country in the world. 44% of millennials now say that. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. 18 million Americans cannot afford to fulfill the prescriptions that their doctors give to them. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. Our medical debt is $88 billion. Meanwhile, the top 5 pharmaceutical companies last year, their profit last year alone was $80 billion. Half of America's seniors live $25,000 and less every year. Among the workers in the United States, 1/3 of them live on less than $15 an hour and cannot afford a place to live. That's not going to stop unless we stop it. The Republicans started it. No Democratic president has stopped it. Let's just get really clear about this. And let's stop being naive, and let's stop thinking, well, just, it's kind of like when a guy's cheating on you, and then he comes out, come on, baby, give me one more chance. Are we going to give him one more chance? Come on, at what point do we say, no. I am so done with your excuses, and I am so done with your promises. It's now baked into the cake. So one political party represents a nosedive as far as I'm concerned for our democracy. But that's in the general. We're talking about the primary. And my point is that this particular corporatist direction, because the Democratic Party is trying to have it both ways. So the Democratic Party does see all the pain that I have just described. Now, when I say the Democratic Party, let's be clear about what I'm talking about here. The corporatist establishment leadership element of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is in this major war within itself right now. There are the progressives who are saying, wait a minute, why don't we in the richest country in the world have what they have in every other advanced democracy? Universal health care, where people aren't rationing their insulin, where people aren't putting it on the internet, a GoFundMe page to help them afford a life-saving operation, where there is no medical debt. And the only reason we have it here is for multi-billion-dollar profits made by the insurance companies. Why is it that we don't have free college, where they have that, which we had here in the United States till the 1960s? And by the way, when I was growing up, Blue Cross Blue Shield was a nonprofit. And we had free college. Like that, so Americans are saying, well, why don't we have that? Why don't we have what they have in every other advanced democracy, as in free childcare, as in paid family leave after the birth of a child, as in guaranteed sick pay, as in a guaranteed livable wage. They are not going to do this. The Republicans aren't even going to pretend, and the Democratic establishment leadership is saying, yes, yes, we really need to work towards that. Yeah, we really, and you should send us back, because we're working towards that. And we gave you a little bit here. See what we did? We got pharmaceutical companies, they'll say, we got them. Yeah, within 10 years, the pharmaceutical companies, there are 10 drugs, and they're going to get to determine what those drugs are and how much they're going to reduce the price. While meanwhile, that same president who is saying, yeah, we got them, has said that he would refuse to sign a Medicare for All bill if it came to his desk. These are the corporatists in that party. The corporatists who say, yes, climate change is an existential threat. Yes, it's an existential threat. While on the other hand, you're giving more drilling permits than even Trump did. You have approved the Willow project, and now just yesterday you approved the export by 2030 of the liquefied natural gas. Between Willow project and that liquefied natural gas, that nullifies all the investments in green energy that they are now bragging about. It's not that they're not nice people. You know, there was a lot of talk about George Bush being a nice person. Yeah, I'm sure he was a nice person, but ask the Iraqis how they feel about what a nice person is. We really need to grow up here. And we really need to get over, for those of us who are Democrats, some of you might be independent, some of you might be Republicans, I don't know. But in speaking to those of you who are Democrats, we need to get over our codependent relationship with the DNC. Oh, they've decided. They've decided that Biden is the one. At a time when the fascists are literally at the door, no, we should not be just allowing the DNC to decide. We should be having a very serious conversation about who and what we think would beat the fascists in 2024 and what would repair this country. And as far as I'm concerned, whether it's me, whether it's Bobby Kennedy, whether it's anyone else who gets into the race, the options, as many options as possible, should be before you. And how can you say that you are going to be the conduit for the protection of democracy when you as an organization, in this case a political party, are operating in a way that is so wary of actual democracy? So I thank you for being here, because I do have a very different agenda than Joe Biden does. It has nothing to do with how nice a person Joe Biden is. He is a very nice person. I don't know him well. I met him on the campaign last time. He was certainly nice. I think his wife is like really lovely. This is not about that. This is not personal. This is about the fate of our country. They are going to come at the Democratic Party in 2024 with big lies. The only way we can override that is with big truths, not kind of sort of truths. You know, when you raise your hand in a court of law, you are asked to declare and to commit and to swear to the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And if you're going to say more than the truth and you're going to get into the whole truth and nothing but the truth, it's that the Democratic Party establishment too often has been under the sway of those same corporatist elements. So whereas the Republicans in that aspect of the Republican Party won't even try to help people, the Democrats too often, those Democrats will say, we want to help people on the periphery, which I believe that the president does. But there is an unwillingness to go deep enough to challenge the underlying corporate forces that make the return of all that pain inevitable. So basically what the Biden agenda and the agenda of the corporatist Democrats is we want to help people survive. Why in the richest country in the world should life be so hard to survive? No. We're the richest country in the world. Why are 39% of Americans saying they're skipping meals to pay their rent? No, this is not just about helping them survive that unjust system. We need to end that injustice. And then what that system calls a qualified candidate is someone qualified to effectuate and perpetuate what they're already doing. We're supposed to say only those who have had decades of experience in the car that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered to drive us out of this ditch. I'm not here because I'm experienced at effectuating that system, but I do believe I'm experienced enough to help disrupt that system, and that is what this country needs. And if you ask me, well, what makes you, how do we believe that? I'm doing it right now. Do you see any other progressive here talking to you? Well, now Bobby is. But have you seen any of those from within that system? No. Because it's all about making sure the DNC likes you. This is everything that George Washington warned us about. He said that political parties, he feared in his farewell address, he said political parties would form factions of men who were more concerned about their party than their country. John Adams said he thought it was the biggest threat to democracy. They're not in our Constitution. They have a gatekeeper function now that was never intended. They're not the power we are, but we have been trained to expect too little and to assert too little power. And I remind you once again what it says in the Declaration of Independence, that if government is not doing its job to secure, to say to kids, put the American young people, some of whom might be in this room, shackle you with college debts when all you're trying to do is get educated? That's thwarting your rights. That's not securing your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that banks can make more money, and the water and the food and the environmental toxins and the $858 billion defense budget when we no longer in Iraq, we got out of Afghanistan, but still the defense budget is just getting larger. At what point are the American people going to say, we've been played? Because that's exactly what's happened here. We've been played. Now, if you're among 20% of Americans, life is good in this country. And I've been fortunate. I've sold some books. I've written books. I've had a career. I'm among that 20%, and I would hope everybody in this room is among that 20%. These days in America, you never know who might be next to you rationing their insulin, though, I'll tell you. If you're among the 20%, life in the economy in the United States is fine. 20%. 20%. That 20% is it's like some enchanted economic island surrounded by a vast sea of economic despair. And we're going to go in 2024. I read that what the president plans to say in 2024 is the economy's good. The economy's good? To say that the economy is good is directly contradictory to the visceral experience of the majority of Americans. How did that work out in 2016? Didn't work out well at all. It infuriated people, actually, to be told that they should, be grateful for all this good that was going on when that was not their experience? So I have a very different agenda that I would be presenting to the American people in 2024, and that is we need an economic U-turn. We need universal health care. We need free college. We should get rid of that college loan debt. We should have free child care. We should have paid family leave. And we should have guaranteed sick pay. And we should have a guaranteed livable wage. We should have a Department of Peace because we should do as much to seek to create peace as we need to be prepared for war if and when a war is necessary. We should have a Department of Children and Youth. America's children, if you compare the state of America's children to children around the world, it's horrifying. The state of poverty in the United States, the state of our children. No, ladies and gentlemen, we are not doing well. But we could be. And what I learned last time, so many times people ask me, what did you learn from the last campaign? And what I learned it here in New Hampshire, as well as in other primary states. You know what I learned? The American people are not the problem. And this is proven in poll after poll. If you actually look at what the American people want, but our legislators do not serve the will of their constituency as much as they serve the will of their corporate donors, because Congress has become like a system of legalized bribery. There is a political, industrial, media complex. So what I learned last time was a system, and I've learned it again this time already. The system is even more corrupt than I feared, but the people are even more wonderful than I hoped. There's nothing wrong with the American people. We're no better or worse than anybody else. We're as decent and dignified and intelligent as the people anywhere. But I will tell you this difference, and I hope that this campaign is helping to change this. If you have a personal conversation, if I had a one-on-one conversation with any of you in this room, my experience of the American people is we'd get down and get real. We'd get real, we'd be authentic, we'd be like, what's really going on with your family, your marriage, your health, we get real. But in the public sphere, we get shallow because we've been trained that way. Let's keep it on a 7th grade slogan level, okay? Let's leave it on that level of things like send me to Washington and fight for you. Our best days are ahead of us. No, we have to get as deep and as real and as mature in the public sphere as we are in the private. And like I said, I'm privileged to have the opportunity to be real with you in a public setting. And if you believe that that's necessary, as I do, in order to form the kind of force that's necessary to change this country, I hope you'll join with me, because I believe we can. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I so appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.